There's just something about disc golf that makes you fall in love with it. For some people, it's getting out in nature. For others, it's the competition. But the most common answer is perhaps the most simple: watching the disc fly. There's just something about it. Watching them crash to the ground in an instant? Flip over so fast they hardly go anywhere? If watching discs fly through the air is what the sport is all about, then why are some of the most popular discs in disc golf the discs that fly the worst? I mean, they are literally the worst at flying. Ultra overstable, super understable, extremely slow, anti-glide. Why? Well, I'm not sure I can answer why, but we are going to take it upon ourselves to answer the question that perhaps no one is asking: which disc flies the least? Hey everyone, it's Greg from Six Sided Discs. This is Flight Numbers Don't Matter, and today we've assembled 25 of the weirdest, slowest, anti-glidiest discs you've ever seen. Now, in the past, we've done comparisons about trying to find the farthest flying putter and the farthest flying mid-range, because people like to throw far. Everyone's always asking people,
how far can you throw? How far can you throw? How far can you throw?
365.
If you can throw 365 right now, I'll give you any disc from the bag.
And it's all about crushing your shot as far as possible. But why then are inverted domes and anti-glide one-speed so popular, when they're literally designed not to fly far? Well, it's all about accuracy and consistency. Sure, when you want to attack a wide-open par 5, you're going to want a disc that can fly as far as possible. But what about when you're approaching a hole like this with a huge river behind it, or death putts like this? All you care about in these situations is not going as far as possible, and that's what these discs are all about. But making a disc fly bad is harder than you think. For example, this is one of the least aerodynamic discs in all of disc golf. The Doomsday Landmine is basically just a series of right angles, the Minecraft version of a disc. So you would expect it to fly incredibly poorly and not very far at all. But you'd be wrong. I threw it twice alongside the rest of today's discs, and it made it all the way out to 196 and 190 feet, respectively. Which, compared to the discs that we threw today, made it one of the farthest flying discs of the day. Yeah, exactly. So what other discs are potentially good at not flying? Well, the Berg gained cult status for being an anti-glide master. The Stasis is one of the most anticipated releases of 2026 for the same reason. Discs like the Zone OS, Stego, Tilt, and Apocalypse are all hilariously overstable, but they're also popular for doing what they do so well that they become incredibly dependable at that very specific thing. So today we're going to take every one of those and quite a few others to a field where I will be throwing them as hard as possible to see which one is the best at being the worst at flying. However, as we began pondering what discs would be the worst at flying, we came up with a lot of options that would be bad for very different reasons, which is why we've broken them down into the following categories. The one speeds. If speed was the only metric that determined distance, these would be the worst at flying, purely based on how aerodynamic they aren't. Our one-speed category contains some of the classics, like the Innovasonic, MVP Glitch, and the Discmania Spore. There are other one-speeds in other categories, but those one-speeds have something else about them that makes them fly even worse, like anti-glide technology. Designed to glide less to enhance accuracy, anti-glide discs employ things like thumb tracks and reverse domes to reduce lift and make them drop to the ground even faster. Our anti-glide discs include some discs you may have heard of, like the Castoplast Sten, the Luftdiscs Neon, and the Streamline Range, as well as quite a few discs you haven't heard of, like the brand new Elevation Discs Groundhog, and a disc that I just received in the mail all the way from Denmark, the Supersonic Discs Gravity. It's like a more extremely puddle-topped Berg. We have 3 additional discs in our anti-glide category: the cult classic Castoplast Berg itself, the all-new, very hyped MVP Stasis, and a disc that's been compared to both, our very own Hexagon. Now, a couple weeks ago, we put out a video where I threw the Hexagon in a sanctioned tournament, something that is not allowed under the rules and earns you a 2-stroke penalty. But what if you don't want a two-stroke penalty? What if you want a hexagon-like flight in a tournament that's legal? Well, you would need a disc that wishes it was a hexagon and flies close enough to the same, like these. These are our brand new custom stamps on the Kastaplast Berg and the MVP Stasis. We're not saying all Bergs and Stasis wish they were hexagons, but these ones certainly do. You can get your Stasis in a bunch of different colors of neutron plastic, and the Berg in 5 different plastics this weekend while you're picking up one of these, our brand new Ocean Hexagon. The Ocean Hexagon is one of our favorite colors so far. Nearly all of them have these beautiful subtle swirls of lighter and darker shades of blue, and Ocean feels very similar to the Salmon Hexagon. They're stiff but not too stiff, grippy but not too grippy. The feel is just right. Just as expected, Jesse and the team at Trash Panda have delivered once again. You can get your Ocean Hexagon and our new custom Berg and Stasis this coming Saturday, May 30th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Now let's move on from our anti-glide discs to a category that's all about overstability, and way too much of it, our Mega Beef drivers. Utility drivers like the Discmania Tilt, Doomsday Apocalypse, and the Ballistdisc Creedmoor OS aren't good at much, but they are great at the one thing that they're designed to do, getting to the ground as fast as possible. And as you might expect, those 3 drivers are not the only discs to employ this ultra overstable technology, because we also have the Mega Beef mid-ranges. There are, in fact, quite a few insanely overstable mid-ranges, such as the Reptilian Disc Golf Stego, the AGL Baobab, Jester Disc Golf Cryptid, Discraft Zone OS, and the Doomsday Frag. One characteristic of both these Mega Beef drivers and the Mega Beef mid-ranges is that the harder you throw them, the more overstable they become. So I'll be throwing them as hard as my little arms can manage. Last but not least is a category I sort of added at the last minute, but one that I do think has a sneaky chance of winning: ultralight discs. These ultralight discs in the 120 grams or less range include the Toss and Catch Intercore from Trash Panda, a pair of super light Innova putters, the Polecat and AVR, as well as a super light Gateway Saber, Dynodiscs Spinosaurus, and the Dynodiscs Tyrannosaurus Rex. So 25 discs, 5 categories, and because my arm is a lot older and not as robust as Josh or Caleb's is, I will be throwing all of them just twice. I'll be trying to throw them on a slight anhyzer to flat release, unless there's a better way of trying to get distance from them, and assuming I get a relatively clean release, that distance will count towards our final results. We'll start by finding the worst flying disc in each of our 5 categories, and only then will we be able to crown the worst flying disc in all of disc golf. Without further ado, let's begin with our 1-speeds. And now that you know all the discs that we're using, you've probably already decided that the Glitch, Spore, and Sonic have no chance of being the worst flying disc. And you're probably right. But it might surprise you what their distances actually were. So let's start with the Glitch and Spore. Both are hybrid toss and catch discs with a lot of glide, so they easily cruised out to 237 and 230 feet, respectively. Keep in mind, I'm about to be 39 years old, and I throw in like the low 50 mile an hour range. And 237 and 230 feet may not sound like far, but today, it most definitely is. Our other 1-speed is the Innova Sonic. With flight numbers of 1, 2, -40, it's certainly not a disc I would reach for to get big distance, and it delivered, or didn't, or it did. Anyways, on 2 separate throws, it flew almost exactly the same, out to just 184 feet. And that makes the Sonic the worst flying 1-speed. Let's move on to our next category of 100% meme discs. It's our Mega Beef drivers. The Tilt is famous for being one of, if not the most overstable disc ever made. In fact, when people began to throw the Tilt, they quickly discovered that the harder you throw it, the more overstable it becomes. And ironically, it flies much better upside down than it does right side up. But the thing that really makes these discs true contenders for being the worst at flying is just how quickly they get to the ground. We'll start with the Doomsday Apocalypse, which is outrageously overstable. Our first throw is getting to the ground quick, but it lands so vertically and with so much backspin that it actually kicks it up in the air and bounces several times, which adds nearly another 100 feet. This one finishes at 198. My second shot nearly does the same thing, but doesn't bounce quite as far, landing around 163. Meanwhile, the Tilt has that same overstability, but nowhere near the bounce effect, so it comes to a halt at 162 feet, 1 foot shorter than the Apocalypse. But our lesser-known Mega Beef driver here, the Creedmoor OS from Ballisdisc, is somehow more overstable than either. Rated at 9307, its first shot gets a little bounce, taking it out to 167. But the second shot puts on the brakes as soon as it hits the ground to set the number to beat at just 142 feet. I am genuinely doubtful that any other disc can fly less than 142 feet, but let's find out by diving into our ultralights. These discs range from about 106 grams to 122 grams and include both putters and drivers. We'll begin with our putters, and first up is the Trash Panda Ultralight Inner Core, which in nearly every plastic is very, very straight, but this ultralight batch gets a lot more turn. Not enough that they wouldn't easily cruise out to 192 feet and 211 feet on my 2 throws. But what about a pair of ultralight putters from Innova? Well, here's a 110 gram Polecat. The Polecat's worst distance was 154 feet. A noble effort, but it's not anywhere near the Creedmoor OS. The Aviar, on the other hand, could only manage 177 feet, nowhere near being the worst at flying. But what about some ultralight drivers? Well, you probably think of ultralight discs as being super understable, but the Dynodisc's Spinosaurus is anything but. It's so overstable that it barely turns when I throw it at full speed. Keep in mind, this disc is only 119 grams, and it absolutely crushes out to 254 feet and 243 feet on my 2 throws. This Gateway Ultralight Sabre was much more understable, but it had enough stability to fight out of its initial turn, and it would cruise all the way out to 228 and 261 feet, not what we're looking for today. It's probably at this point that you're wondering why we included this category, but I included it because I knew this next disc was coming. This is the Dynodisc's Tyrannosaurus Rex. This 14-speed distance driver at less than 120 grams is one of the most understable discs you will ever throw. So understable, in fact, that it flips, turns, and lands upside down to effectively roll backwards when it hits the ground. Not once, but twice, registering 146 feet and 144 feet. That's only 2 discs farther than the Creedmoor, so close to the worst flying disc, but not quite. So maybe some extremely mega beefy mid-ranges will do the trick. Let's begin with 2 discs cut from the same mold. AGL's old Baobab, now out of production as AGL no longer makes discs with Gateway, and Jester Disc Golf, who has begun molding a few discs with Gateway. With this, the Cryptid, which is essentially the new Baobab. The Baobab is literally rated with 0 glide, but this one's also pretty beat up, so how far could it go? Well, somewhere between nowhere and somewhere. The Baobab sort of flew a bit, out to 176 feet and 169 feet, while the Cryptid, being brand new and not at all beat in, managed just 158. Not to be outdone, we also have the Discraft Zone OS, which over these 2 throws managed just 153 feet. An impressive showing? Yes, impressive. Yes, impressive. I need to remember, less distance is good. Yes. Can the Reptilian Disc Golf Stego do any less? It is, after all, the more extreme version of the AGL Baobab, and it shows. The Stego dove to the ground, stuck the landing, and clocked the shortest distance so far at just 140 feet. 140 feet. Think about that. I'm not trying to throw an approach shot. I'm actually throwing as hard as I can, even though I'm getting older and only throw in the low 50-mile-an-hour range. That is as far as a Stego goes. But perhaps the Doomsday Frag can do better. On its first attempt, it drops like a rock to 165 feet. And on the second throw, it is a shockingly short distance of just 134 feet. So I'm happy to give the Frag the authentic title of the worst flying disc so far, because we still have 11 anti-glide discs left. So let's dive in. And we're going to begin with Castoplast, and no, not the Berg, but the Sten, a disc that I've not thrown until right here, where I got it out to 196 feet, followed by 164 feet. The Sten's K4 plastic is super sticky and grippy. It's also very lightweight, so I'm kind of surprised with how bad it flew, or I guess good by today's standards. Anyways, the Berg, which is often hailed as the holy grail of anti-glide slow discs, effortlessly cruised out to 184 and 183 feet. But what about the new Stasis, the heir apparent to the Berg's throne? It went even farther, 187 and 198. And obviously, we said earlier that some of them wish they were a hexagon, and it turns out they have something in common, because despite throwing 3 different hexagons, the shortest distance I could get from any of the hexagons was 186 feet. A country mile by today's standards. Okay, but what about the Streamline Range, MVP's first anti-glide disc? Surely it wouldn't fly a full 50 feet past the Berg to be one of the farthest flying discs of the day. Holy moly. Turns out there are very different levels of not flying far. So moving on to the back half of our anti-glide discs, I had high hopes for this, the Supersonic Gravity, but it easily cruised out to 190 feet. Another disc that I expected more from, or rather less, was this, the infamous Luftdiscs Neon. With the most intense reverse dome in the game, the Neon has no glide. It's overstable, and yet it still managed 175 feet at its shortest distance. And that leaves our chances of finding a winner in this anti-glide category with these. This is the very recently released Elevation Discs Groundhog. Rated with the same flight numbers as the Berg, we have it in 2 different blends of their rubber. The extremely floppy OG rubber, and their much stiffer recycled EcoFlex blend. Now, I really got a hold of the first shot with the EcoFlex Groundhog. It made it out all the way to 190 feet, but the other shot really showed that lack of glide, dropping like a rock to 157 feet. Impressively short. But we're going to have to spend a little more time talking about the OG Groundhog, because honestly, I'm not sure how to rate it, and I would like all of you to help me figure this out. So here's my first throw with the Groundhog. And yes, that is as short as you think it is. But before I talk about the distance, let's talk about rubber discs. If you've watched our channel for a while, you know that Josh has struggled with rubber discs in the past, as did Caleb before him. And well, I'm certainly no rubber throwing expert. The conclusion that we've drawn from our past experiences with rubber discs is that there can be quite a bit of a learning curve to get used to how they throw. The main reason for this is this: how much this disc is moving around in your hand before you release it. As you're pulling through with the rubber disc, it's actually like deforming and moving in your hand. And there are some instances where it will move forward before you release, or sort of move back before you release, and it can just lose all of its inertia and all of its momentum. It's pretty wild to see. In fact, that's exactly what happened here on my first throw, which managed just 103 feet. Naturally, I wanted to see if that was a complete fluke or not, so I tried to do better. And throw number 2 was actually 2 feet shorter, just 101 feet. So I changed my approach, and I'm trying really hard to get the Groundhog in the air, and managed to get it to fly out to 161 feet. Throw number 4 crashed back down to just 116. And my other 2 attempts didn't get much better. 156 feet here, and on this final throw, just 130 feet. And honestly, this final throw almost destroyed my knee as I tried to manifest some actual distance from the Groundhog. I survived, but barely. So out of 6 throws, 3 of them were shorter than the shortest throw from any other disc. That in and of itself is impressively bad, but if you compare the 6 throws and average it together, we get just 127 feet. And that is truly the most impressively not flying disc we've ever seen. But the part that I'm asking your help with is, do you think this is a fair result? Based on how we threw all these discs, is the Groundhog really the worst flying disc in the game? Let us know in the comments below. A quick shout out to all our other categories where the Sonic was our worst flying 1-speed at 184 feet, the Creedmoor OS at 142 feet for our Mega Beef drivers, the Tyrannosaurus Rex nearly barrel rolling its way to 144 feet for the ultralights, the Super Beefy Frag in our mid-range category at just 134 feet, and I guess as far as I'm concerned, our outright winner, the Elevation Groundhog at 101 feet, 103 feet, or 130 feet. And that's a little bit of a strange promo, but the Groundhog is now available for sale at sixsideddiscs.com. Anyways, what's the worst flying disc in your bag? That's not really a question I ever thought I would be asking, but let us know in the comments below. And also comment below what you'd like to see in the future on Flight Numbers Don't Matter. Get your Ocean Hexagon this Saturday at noon Eastern at sixsideddiscs.com. And for Six Sided Discs, I'm Greg. We'll see you in the next one. All you care about in these... Now let's move on from our anti-glide discs to a category...
Okay.
Dino Discs Spinosaurus. Oh gosh. Came out early. I might just go ahead and get this. We'll start by finding but the second shot puts on the brakes as soon as it hits the ground to get the number to beat, not just for this category, but for If you like this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video, subscribing to our channel, or becoming a member. Your support makes this content possible.
Wow.